In most shounen stories, we often see that one character, the rival. They're obviously not the main character, nor are they the final villain, but they matter just as much. Because they challenge the hero, they reflect their weakness, they push the story forward, sometimes even harder than the protagonist ever could. Take Sasuke and Vegeta as an example. Their arcs don't just mirror Naruto or Goku's, they help to shape them. They set the tone, they create the tension, and they help to drive the story forward. But in One Piece, that character doesn't really exist. There's no Sasuke, no Vegeta, no one Luffy's constantly chasing or being chased by. There's no childhood friend turned enemy, no elite rival desperate to prove he's better. There's no singular relationship that carries the emotional weight of the journey. And yet, One Piece never feels like it's missing something. Because what those rivals do in Naruto or Dragon Ball push the plot forward, deepen the themes, and test the hero's values. But One Piece achieves all of that, just in a different way. It spreads the tension across the world. It doesn't focus on one person's rivalry. It gives every character their own dream, their own ideology, and lets those collide with Luffy's path. That's what makes it special. Not better, not worse, just different. So today I want to talk about what One Piece gains by not having a traditional rival, and why Luffy's story works without a Sasuke or a Vegeta, and how the absence of a rival became part of what defines the journey of One Piece. Rivalries in anime aren't just about competition, they're about contrast. They give the protagonist someone who forces them to confront their own beliefs, about strength, about purpose, and about themselves. And in the best stories, the rival doesn't just grow alongside the main character, they also pull the story forward. Let's think about Vegeta for a second. He doesn't just challenge Goku's powers, he creates arcs. It's his arrival that defines the Saiyan saga, it's his pride and obsession that spark conflict on Namek. And it's his arrogance that gives Cell the opening he needs to ascend. Every time Vegeta moves, the story shifts. He's not just chasing Goku, he's shaping the journey. And then let's take Sasuke. Naruto doesn't want to surpass him, he wants to bring him back. And everything Sasuke does, leaving the village, aligning with Orochimaru, attacking the summit, spirals into larger events. He becomes like a second spine to the story, a path that runs parallel to Naruto's, sometimes even crossing it. In both cases, the rival isn't just a character, they're a narrative device, a way to test the protagonist's resolve, a tool to escalate the world, the stakes, and the emotion. And that's why the rival trope works. It's not just about the tension between two people, it's about the friction that fuels everything else. But what if you remove that single point of friction and let the whole world push back? Because that's what One Piece does. Luffy's never had a rival in the traditional sense. No lifelong foil, no ex-best friend turned enemy, no character who shadows his journey trying to catch up or pull him back. And sure, there are contenders like Kid, Law, or Blackbeard, but none of them hold the emotional gravity that Vegeta or Sasuke bring to their stories. Kid and Law are competitors at best. They're chasing the same treasure, but they're never framed as foils to Luffy's beliefs or growth. They clash, they cooperate, they exist, but they don't haunt the story. And Blackbeard, yes, he's a narrative counterweight. He represents what happens to you when you chase freedom with no morality, no love, and no true crew. But he's not a personal rival, he's a villain, a final test. Luffy doesn't know him as a brother or a friend. He knows him as a threat. There's no one in One Piece who mirrors Luffy in the same way Sasuke mirrors Naruto, for example. No one who forces him to grapple with personal failure. No one whose fall feels like it could have been his own. And yet, Luffy still grows, still struggles, and still carries the emotional weight that rival-driven stories often rely on. So the question is, how does One Piece do it? Well, it spreads the emotional burden across the crew, across the world, and across the very idea of freedom itself. Instead of one rival shaping the emotional arc, each member of the Straw Hat steps into the spotlight. Nami's trauma drives Arlong Park, Usopp's pride fractures the crew in Water 7, Robin's past triggers the firestorm of Enies Lobby, and Sanji's family history tears everything apart in Whole Cake Island. These aren't just subplots, they are the plot. And that's the beauty of not having a rival. Oda isn't forced to funnel all the tension through one relationship. Instead, he lets the entire crew and their pasts, beliefs, and flaws shape their journey. One Piece builds tension through the weight of its world. The revolutionaries plot a global rebellion in silence. The Marines fracture under their own sense of justice. Blackbeard rewrites the rules of power in real time. Each move the likes of Shanks and Dragon make shifts the entire balance of the world. And in the background, characters like Law, Kid, or Buggy chase their own dreams. Not as foils to the main character, but as protagonists of stories running parallel. Their choices don't just support the plot, they compete with it. So we see that there's no single rivalry anchoring the emotional stakes. Instead, there are dozens of lives, clashing ideologies, and personal wars, all pulling the world in different directions. And that's what One Piece does best. It replaces the sharp personal rivalry with something broader. An entire sea of stories, each one pushing the world forward. When a story removes the central rival, it removes a shortcut. There's no guaranteed emotional tension, no built-in mirror to reflect the hero's flaws. No one person to blame or save when things fall apart. apart. That could be a problem unless the story finds another way, and as we see, One Piece does that. Because without a rival, the story doesn't narrow, it can expand as well. Instead of channeling all the tension through a single relationship, One Piece lets the entire world carry that weight. Not just the villains, not just the government, the crew, the allies, the enemies, the legends, everyone matters. While other shonen do this too, such as when Naruto's values were tested by the shinobi system, the core story still orbited around a central rivalry, a foil who reflected Naruto's journey. But One Piece lets go of that orbit and lets the story breathe outward. Without a Sasuke or a Vegeta, Oda doesn't need to ground the conflict in one relationship. Instead, he gives pieces of it to everyone. The Straw Hats don't just support Luffy, they drive the story with him, with each having their own dedicated arcs to solve their inner conflict as mentioned before. And that's just the crew. Outside of them we have Law, Kid, Shanks, Blackbeard, Dragon, Sabo. All have their own weight, all have their own story arcs, and all have their own purpose. They aren't just extensions of Luffy's journey, they act as their own axes, pulling the world in different directions, which makes you care about what's happening even when Luffy's not there. That's what One Piece gains by not having a rival, because a world doesn't need a central rivalry to feel full, if it's already overflowing with stories. Oda gives us a living and moving world, where everyone is someone's favorite character, where the weight of the journey is spread wide, and where no single rivalry could ever contain it all. And of course, it goes without saying, rivalries are iconic for a reason. They reflect, they challenge, they give the protagonist something personal to fight for. In Dragon Ball, Naruto, and so many other stories, that dynamic becomes the engine. But One Piece chose something different. It said, what if instead of one rival, you gave every character a reason to matter? Because when there's no singular foil to Luffy, the emotional gravity doesn't disappear, it spreads. Across the Straw Hats, whose backstories drive entire arcs. Across the world, where characters like Law, Kid, and Shanks hold just as much narrative weight. And across enemies and empires whose ideologies test not just Luffy, but everyone. In One Piece, the story stays sharp because everyone's story matters. There's no emotional bottleneck, no central relationship that demands all the tension. And that's why it works so well, because in One Piece, conflict isn't funneled, but it's more unfolded, piece by piece, arc by arc, and character by character. So yeah, One Piece may not have a rival, but that's not a flaw. It's a choice that gave us one of the most richest, widest, and most beloved worlds in anime. Because when you spread the spotlight, you don't just make the main character shine, you make the whole world unforgettable. And that's it for this week's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe if you did. I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who's been supporting the channel ever since I started doing these long form videos. It really means a lot to me and I try to read all of your comments. I'm gonna be making weekly anime analysis videos, so feel free to leave a comment down below and let me know what kind of videos you would like to see in this channel in the future. And while you're at it, let me know what your favorite shounen anime is. It will be interesting to know which shows are the most popular amongst my viewers, and maybe it'll give me some extra video ideas as well. So once again, I'd like to say thank you for all the support, and without further ado, I'll see you all next week.